Can everyone please help me welcome to today's episode and the Legal Blend podcast a very special guest and dear friend, David Segro from Signature Realty, correct?
That's correct.
Realtor, good friend, and advisor actually in all things real estate, right? So Dave, welcome to the episode. Welcome to Sierra Coffee Group here in Lyndhurst, New Jersey. And how's the coffee, by the way?
Thank you for having me, and the coffee is phenomenal. This is actually my first cappuccino ever.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, so we popped a cherry today.
First one.
And it's from Honduras, which is actually very rare to find around here, like I was discussing before. So you like it?
Phenomenal. And I'm not really a big coffee drinker, but I'm starting to get into it now more and more, and this actually tastes a lot different than I expected, but it's a good difference, so.
You would come back?
I would 100% come back.
You heard it here first.
I mean, I door knock half the neighbors around here, so I'll pop back in.
That is true. Yeah. So for those of you who don't know, David Segro, like I said, he's a realtor all over the state of New Jersey, correct?
From, I would say, Sussex down all the way to Cape May County.
There we go. And tell us a little bit about yourself, Dave. How long have you been doing it? Realtor in New Jersey.
So I've been this is coming up on 6 years now, and it's been great. I got licensed right before COVID. Okay. So literally July of 2019, first 6 months was just in the office studying, learning, picking everybody's brain as much as I can. And I then got into 2020 and actually had my first home sale literally January of 2020. Wow. And then as you know, COVID hits, and all of a sudden I just haven't stopped going since.
Did we do that closing? The first one you had?
No, you didn't do the first one I had. No.
Wow.
No.
Can we cut this?
Rough.
But I want to get into it, Dave, because there's something that happened recently, right? Mm-hmm. That you actually used me on this transaction, right?
Yes.
I represented seller or buyer?
This was the seller.
Seller.
Yes.
Okay. Can you walk us through it? Because a big topic that we always hear about, people get scared.
Yes.
Underground oil tanks.
Correct.
So can we highlight a little bit about what happened from your perspective, lay the foundation of what we went through? Sure.
So we had a listing that we didn't know at the time actually had an underground oil tank until it was discovered when the buyers had their home inspection. And the, I guess, interesting part about it was it wasn't buried underground. It was in the crawl space of the house that was very hard to get into.
Correct. And underground oil tank, the first thing you think about as a realtor?
First thing I think about is it decommissioned or is it still in operation? They had no idea that they had it still. So then I think, we're going to have to deal with potentially a leak if there was or potentially ever is one. That's going to be a big problem potentially that's going to hold up the sale.
So just to lay some foundation, underground oil tank, usually it's filled with or used for?
Usually used for heating. Back in the day, most houses were heated with oil heat, and naturally over time they've converted to natural gas, and this is a problem if it wasn't done the right way in terms of decommissioning it. A lot of times they're going to fill it with some inert substance, usually sand, and they didn't have to pull it back in the day as much as right. Now they, of course, want things taken out of the ground, not kept in the ground.
So if you hear that a property you're buying or you're selling, you find out there's an underground oil tank, right? It doesn't necessarily mean, okay, deal canceled, terminated. There is a solution to it.
Correct. There's always a solution. It's just a lot of times, especially if it's someone or you're not familiar, or you might have heard through, friends or family that this is a deal breaker. A lot of people freak out as soon as they hear the words underground oil tank.
Yeah, and I remember in that transaction, okay, buyer had the home inspection. They found out there's an oil tank, right? Next step is we try to find out, like you said, is there a leak? Is it decommissioned? Decommissioned meaning, is it in use still? And the town knows about it, and they found out that it's not in use, so they're okay with it. It's not being pulled, right?
Yes.
But let's say in this case, did the buyer want it pulled? I forget.
Yes.
They did, right? Okay.
Yes.
So once you pull an oil tank, what are the potential consequences of that?
So, right, you can't just take it out without letting anybody know, right? So you have to go through the town to get the permit to remove it. Okay. And then, of course, the town is usually going to bring out their inspector to make sure that when it is being removed, there is no contamination of the soil.
Gotcha.
And then what added the layer of complexity with this deal was that it was in the worst possible position to be removed. So it was literally in the crawl space, but under the extension of the house. So it was like pretty much smack dab in the middle of the living room.
It was like under concrete, right?
It was under concrete, and then in there they had an extension put on the house. So it literally was like if you were sitting on your couch watching TV, you were sitting right above the tank.
And of course, for sellers, that means most of the time sellers pull it, right?
Correct.
Most of the time sellers are responsible to pull the oil tank, and that depends on the attorney review process and all that.
Yes.
But that means potentially added expense to the seller, right?
Correct. So the seller might have to spend a couple $1,000s, and then again, it depends also, right, how big it is, also how, again, hard it is to be removed, because unless you're going to cut the floor to then remove the tank, you'd have to send people in the crawl space with tools to then, in a sense, cut the tank into pieces to then remove the tank. So that could, of course, even be a greater expense in labor costs.
What did you add to the transaction of value? What did David Segro do in this transaction that eased the sellers regarding this issue?
So I think the big thing was being in communication with everybody, the town, the contractor that was contracted to remove the actual tank, and then of course the buyers too, because they were spending a large sum of money. They wanted to make sure that it was done right and that everybody was knowing what part of the process of the removal we were currently in. So that was, I'd say, one of the big things of actually having a system of communication and not just being like, hey, we're done, and nobody knows anything for like the 3 weeks previous because no one stays in communication. So that was really big. And then also with that, having the contractors and knowing who could do a job like that and not just hiring anybody off of Google search,
Right.
and having someone that you trust, and they have the experience to handle specific removals like that.
Now, if I remember correctly, we went to pull it,
Yes.
right? And we go to pull it. What's one thing that our viewers should know about when you go to pull an oil tank? What are certain steps you have to do next?
So after it's pulled, they will have to usually test the soil to make sure that, right, whether it was then or any time in the past, there was no contamination or leak of the oil into the ground.
Go ahead.
No, and unfortunately that has been a issue that a lot of homeowners have faced, because a lot of times they might not even have known they had a tank because they bought the property and they might have not even remembered. And now with the technology and of inspectors being able to, find those tanks, they could have been buried for 50 plus years or something. And now that homeowner unfortunately has to deal with that situation if they want to sell the house.
And now, soil testing, right? You touched upon soil testing. How many times do you usually have to test the soil, meaning the sellers, to try to get the tank out?
It depends. So usually they'll test it right away and they'll see. This one we actually had multiple testings, which took an even longer time to get it, to finally get to the point of it being clear with a no further action letter coming through.
And for those of you watching this episode, no further action comes from the state of New Jersey, correct?
Yes.
So after we pull the tank, soil testing is done, possibly more than once. The state of New Jersey says, we evaluated the soil testing, everything looks good, no further action is needed,
yes.
right? So that letter from the state gives the buyer's peace of mind, seller's peace of mind, we're done with this
Yes.
process.
Yes.
So top 2 or 3 consequences to sellers when you have to pull an oil tank. Let me start with one, right? Mm-hmm. Added time of the transaction.
For sure.
Right? What else?
I think we were probably pushed back at least a month.
Correct.
From realizing it to then finally taking care of it, about a month. So we were delayed there.
Right.
I would say, of course, time, and then it would be, obviously, I'd say next would be money, of course. Now this is an added expense, thousands of dollars that now the seller could say, hey, listen, try to get the buyer to pay it, but a lot of times most buyers will be like, no, this is your responsibility. So then that's another incurred cost to the seller.
Correct. So time and money,
Which
is 2 valuable things for any seller
Especially,
and buyer.
Yeah, especially if the seller then wants to then purchase another home, then you potentially can mess up that part of the next stage of them having to then try to put an offer in on another house.
Correct. Now, there's so many topics I want to touch upon today, Dave, in our limited time. So definitely, we went through it. Successful story.
Great
we got it
learning
removed.
experience, yes.
We closed, right?
Yes, everybody, at the end of the day, everybody was happy.
I remember that transaction also, you helped clear.
We had some remaining items that when the buyers came, they're like, hey, listen, you got to remove this stuff. And the sellers thought they got rid of everything needed to get rid of, but the house wasn't in what we like to call broom swept condition.
Right.
And unfortunately, we had some things that we literally had to get out of there because the buyers were like, listen, we're not going to close this deal until this stuff is out of the house. So I had to change out of the suit and literally get some stuff out of the house, which again, I always like to say I'll do anything in terms of being of service to my clients, because if I'm able to do it, I'm going to do it. But that also was a interesting ending to it, because we thought we were clear after the tank was pulled, but then there was that little bit of added stress of like, oh my God, we might not close today because we need to get some things out of here that, and thank God, again, I had another resource. I had a couple of people in the scrap industry that were able to come and take things that were very heavy, and the town, of course, just wouldn't pick it up.
Right.
So yeah, we had a little bit of an extra situation that occurred at the end.
And this is actually a true story, because when I found out that it wasn't a broom clean swept condition, I called Segro, but Segro's already huffing and puffing. He's like, hey, I'm taking care of it. I'm moving everything, right?
Yes.
So that's what you get with Dave. You get full service from beginning to end, and he
Really
worries,
hands-on.
really
Hands-on.
hands-on. He takes off the suit. I know you see him in the suit in the reels and posts on Instagram, but he does take it off, and he will get you to closing. He will get you to closing. But one thing that I wanted to highlight today, I would be upset if I don't. Your certifications. One thing that I think helps us work together a lot is your certification with divorcing clients, right?
Yes.
So can you speak about that a little bit?
Yeah, so it kind of came by working with you a lot, and of course with your family law background in your firm, right? There was always talk of like, hey, Dave, listen, I have unfortunately clients that are getting divorced. Can you find out the value of the property for me? So of course I would start doing that for you, and then you kind of spurred the idea of like, well, hey, listen, why don't you look and see if there's any specific certification you can get to, in a sense, be of better service and value to that specific demographic of people. So then I searched that out, and I actually got what we call a CDRE, which is a Certified Divorce Real Estate Expert.
CDRE.
Yes.
Okay.
And they're out of California, great alumni institute. They taught me over the course of 12 weeks, pretty much, I like to say, a master's in divorce, because everything I learned, and I was also speaking with you, was a lot of family law. I learned a lot about the law side about divorce, and then of course how that intersects with real estate.
Which it does tremendously, right? Because for most of you out there who haven't been through a divorce, thank your lucky stars you haven't, because it's an emotionally tolling experience, financially expensive, right? It's very expensive, time consuming, mentally draining. But a lot of times, I would say, a lot of couples have a marital home, right? Condo, home, whatever it is. And because of the divorce, they have to decide who's going to stay, who's going to go, or sell the property because there's equity in the property. So someone like Dave comes along and can help us be a tool, an advisor to evaluate those options for our client, right? So tell me, how do you handle the different emotions? Because you're working with one partner and the other partner,
Yes.
in trying to have them agree on home value, how to sell,
Yeah.
what to list, right? All these
All
things.
these things, yeah.
So how do you handle that? How do you juggle that?
I think it's really having a good process and having good systems. So from what I was taught, and then applying it now with actual two real people that, again, right, were once happy together and now unfortunately for whatever reason want to go their separate ways. Like, right, you said, dealing with a lot of emotions, a lot of stress, anxiety, fear, and of course the financial side of it all becomes extremely difficult for a lot of people to manage. And just like how they're going to hire a potential mediator or a family law attorney, you want to bring someone like myself in early in the process, because again, knowing your options early can help alleviate or at least reduce a lot of the emotional and financial stress that's a lot of times exacerbated as you go through a divorcing process, right? As the divorce goes on, especially if it's not going well or it's not going amicably, right? It just becomes more and more of a burden and stress on those homeowners. So coming in early and being able to help them, in a sense, know their options and being able to kind of sit down with them. And sometimes I'm not sitting down with both of them at the same time, right? Because they won't even be in the same room as each other. So I have that ability to be really like a neutral third party and being able to work with both sides to come to a solution.
So what would you say is a top issue you see? Well, let me rephrase. What's the top item you see couples disagree on when you come into the picture to list their property for sale?
A lot of times, unfortunately, I come into the picture later than I would like to, because sometimes it's court appointed, so sometimes it already has been a process, and now the judge might appoint myself at that point, and there's already all this history or this process gone through. So I would say where I kind of start is I like to, of course, speak to both parties and kind of see where they both are at with not only the home value, but what the outcome they want. Because sometimes one person might want to live in that house. They might have built memories in that house and they were there for multiple years, and they're like, I really want to stay and I don't want to sell this. While the other partner might be like, no, we got to get rid of this. I just want to completely separate, take our proceeds and just go our separate ways.
And a lot of times children involved, right? A lot of talking about school district, right? Maybe somebody wants to move to another town that doesn't have comparable school district. All these things matter, right?
Yep.
So having you on or in the transaction helps, because I think you bring the knowledge of what should we list it at, right? And you try to be that neutral party, right?
Yes.
So are there any regrets of working with divorcing clients?
I think in terms of regrets, no. I would say it's probably a lot more emotionally hard to stay neutral when you're becoming, and you know both parties. You start to really, if you're talking to them on the phone a lot, you're in constant communication. That, I think, is the hard part. So I wouldn't say any regrets. It's just more not truly knowing what you're getting into until you're really serving those clients and that specific need they need at that specific point in time. I feel like that becomes emotionally, sometimes it's hard to remain neutral because you start getting the stories from both parties and you have to remain neutral and unbiased because you're just trying to bring it to a point where both parties can, in a sense, exit as cleanly and as financially in the best position as both can.
And just so our viewers understand, is it something common to find realtors with CDRE?
No, not common. It's a very, I would say, I wouldn't use the word just exclusive, but you have to have, in a sense, a certain criteria to even get into the program. So it's almost like if you're going for a master's or any type of graduate degree, you have to test in. You have to have a certain amount of transactions, experience. So it's I would say, you are viewed as an expert. So like if a judge had to bring me in, I can take the stand as an expert witness. So that gives it a lot more, I would say, prestige and just authority as an expert, because I really study and I really understand this from not just a real estate transaction, but from the bigger picture of what this really looks like from the legal side of the matter.
Now, let's take a step back personally, right? Working with divorcing clients, couples, what's one thing that you've learned that you would apply in your marriage or future marriage?
A lot. I would say probably the biggest thing is, I'll give you two.
Don't give me anything abstract, concrete.
I'll give you concrete. So I would say what I hear a lot from when after I intake and I learn about the whole situation and I get the perspectives of the end goals of both parties, and I get to, again, as the transaction is going along, I'm coordinating showings, I'm coordinating inspections, I'm then seeing what they're doing again, if the house is being sold, right, we have two people that might need additional housing. So, right, you have a lot of balls in the air trying to make sure that everybody is or will get to their destination. And I'd say that the thing that has taught me the most that I hear from divorcing clients is that there becomes, over the course of that relationship, a deterioration in communication. So that is a big thing I hear consistently, of just partners not finding the time to communicate. And again, everybody in every relationship is different, but I hear that as a common thread. And then I also hear, interesting enough, when there's children involved, that one or the other partners start to obsess over their children to the point of they forget their partner, and it becomes less and less time about us than it is about the kids. Now, again, the kids are very important. That's a beautiful thing that you guys have together. But the partner will sometimes feel like there's no more attention to them, and almost that becomes a big issue or big contentious point for why a lot of couples start feeling the connection is no longer there between them because they don't make time for their own relationship anymore. And again, the kids, of course, need a lot of attention. They're young and they're growing, however, whatever age, but there's then that disconnect between the couple themselves that I hear about very consistently as another common thread.
Gotcha. So future Mrs. Segro is gonna get from you that she'll expect time from you aside from the kids.
Yes.
She's gonna have great communication with you.
Yes. You gotta know her love language.
I'm not even gonna get into that. Dave, what made you, aside from us talking about it, I'm in family law and everything, what spurred you to just say, okay, I'm gonna do the certification? You said it was a process,
yes.
Right? Why do you enjoy helping divorcing couples find their next home or selling their home? What drives you to do this?
I think it's to be able to provide a service to, I always think, again, from being with Signature Realty, and my broker, John Steingraber, always talks about seek to serve. That's like the first thing I think I learned when I joined his organization. Everybody, especially him, embodies always trying to be of service, right? And I feel like in that specific demographic of people, there wasn't good service. And a lot of times to add to, or in already a stressful situation, the sale of the biggest asset is even a bigger stress now because both parties sometimes are not even, again, speaking to each other anymore. Right. So now there's that added element of now I can be a resource to both parties and be in communication with maybe two people that no longer are speaking. And I feel like that becomes for me such an intrinsic reward of helping people that are in that state, hopefully put them in a better state. So it's service, again, it's always service, but it's just now this service is specialized in this specific, demographic.
No, and I think divorcing clients, a divorcing couple, it's draining for everybody involved, right? Yeah. From the couple to the therapist to the lawyer to the realtor. It's just a draining process, right?
Yes.
Financially too.
Yes.
Mentally, emotionally. So I truly believe that everybody needs those advisors, those experts in their corner to try to help them get to that finish line, which is a divorce, right? So definitely good to know that you thrive on this.
Yeah.
You like to do this.
Yeah. And it gives me the opportunity to, normally I'm working directly to consumers. Now what's great is it gives me the opportunity to network with other professionals in the family law space, in the financial, advisor space. So it's great because it helps me build a bigger network. And again, it becomes always just about synergistically serving in a bigger way.
Gotcha. So Dave, 2025, right? Mm-hmm. New year, everybody's saying new year, new me, right?
Yes.
I know that from your Instagram post, you're training for a marathon?
Half
marathon.
Yeah.
So new year, new me on that theme.
Yes.
What are you looking to get into, develop, evolve as far as divorcing clients and how you serve them?
This year specifically, I want to attend the NJ Bar event in May.
Convention.
The convention.
It's a party.
And to be able to, yes, but also to be able to speak to more people in the space, especially the attorneys. Yeah. That's something I'm excited about because I haven't done at a convention style. I've gone, lunch and learns, going to an attorney's office or a firm and speaking to all their family law attorneys is great because you can really then, have people get to know you, what you do, and then also, again, just be a resource. Be like, hey, listen, Dave, if I have a question, can I call you? I'm like, yeah, call me anytime. Because sometimes, again, the value is those conversations. You could call me up at 10 o'clock at night, be like, hey, Dave, I got this situation. What do you think we should do with the house?
Gotcha. And for those realtors who are tuning in, right? Yeah. What's one piece of advice to a realtor who's starting out?
I think what helped me the most my first 6 months was, of course, I wanted to start making sales. But I think the best thing, because again, the course itself is 75 hours and it really only teaches you how to stay out of trouble. That's basically what I took from the course. There's a lot of law, there's a lot of housing information, which is all good, but the actual what should I be doing on a daily basis to become successful as a realtor? I would say the one thing you could do is find someone who will take you on as maybe like an apprentice. They'll help you. They'll, in a sense, be your coach.
Right.
But then at the same time, the reciprocity is you can then help them if they're too busy to do certain things. You can go work a home inspection. You can work an open house. You can take a buyer out for them, or anything that becomes a leverage to help them if they're very busy.
Gotcha.
So I'd say the best thing you could do is try to either find a coach or find a mentor so that you can shortcut a lot of the common things that new realtors will waste their time on that really aren't either dollar producing or worth, in a sense, expanding their education. They'll focus on things that aren't going to help them and are just a distraction. And again, you're only getting paid when you sell. So if you're relying on that income as your sole income, you have to start really honing in on that quick, because it usually takes, depending on how fast the transaction is, could be 30, could be 60, could be 90 days before you're going to see any fruit from your labor.
Right, of course, of course. Now, if you can indulge me a little bit.
Sure.
I really wouldn't do any with this with any other realtor but you.
Okay.
Okay. So on the fly.
Excellent.
That's where we thrive, right? So for the viewers out there, I've known Dave since I was 14, right? So we're gonna play a little trend that I've seen on social media. Okay. It's called "We Listen and We Don't Judge." I've never done this before on an episode, so it's the first time. So basically, usually couples do it, but it'd be interesting to hear from your perspective. Attorney versus realtor. And I say versus in general, right?
Okay.
Not necessarily
us.
us.
Yeah.
Disclaimer, not us, right? But in general, share our feelings about some irks, irritations that a realtor might have with an attorney during a real estate transaction, and vice versa.
Yes.
So we'll say we listen, we don't judge.
Okay.
One of us goes, and we'll go twice, right?
Okay.
We'll take turns. So, want to try?
Yeah.
All right, do you want to go first, or you want me to go first?
You can go first,
okay.
Just so I can pick up a little bit of how it's supposed to go.
So, and viewers out there, don't judge us.
So as soon as you say whatever you say, then we both say,
we listen and we don't judge, and then you go.
Okay.
All right? Okay. So first we'll start out. We listen.
We listen.
And we don't judge. So realtors sometimes think that they're the quarterbacks of the transaction, and they want to run the transaction, and they don't let other experts or people in the field do their job, but we listen and we don't judge. Okay, your turn.
Sometimes when you really got to get a hold of an attorney and it's after 5 p.m., there's no chance of getting in contact, even if I went and knocked on their door to try to get some information that might be really vital for this transaction to continue or to start. We listen
and we don't judge. So realtors get, at the end, at the closing table, we see the compensation that realtors get, attorneys get, title companies get. And usually the biggest check is the realtors.
Yeah, I'd say
with the least amount of liability. We listen, but we don't judge.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. Well, this comes back to kind of the same, I guess you would say, communication. You try to have a conversation and try to simplify the desires of, just say in this situation, the seller, but sometimes the attorney, coming from their perspective or their lens, really doesn't make it an easy decision for the seller when you think about it is like their outcome desire.
Yeah.
And they kind of muddle it sometimes with, I wouldn't say jargon because that's not the word, but just sometimes just making, I would say, a mountain out of a molehill.
Okay. We listen and we don't judge. I invite realtors, real estate attorneys in the comment section, give us your version. What do you think realtors do, attorneys do? I would love to see the comments. I would love to see them. So I have to bring it up because everybody who knows of you or asks me, do I know you? Two things come up, right? Recently, the video of you on Instagram running in a suit, right?
Yep.
And then you have the reel, which had a lot of views, you jumping in a pool at a listing with a suit.
Correct.
Right. So I'm sure a lot of you have seen it out there. But tell me, Dave,
I saved the suit and the shoes, by the way.
You did?
They were not harmed in the making of that video.
There you go.
Actually,
There you go. A lot of people had questions about
It's still
that.
in the closet. It's still ready to go.
But the Commuter's Realtor, that's who you are,
Yes.
right? So
Yes.
tell me, you started out in 2020, you said?
Right, but 2019 technically, but 2020 was the first full year.
In the industry, the real estate industry, a lot of people, become realtors and they leave. How did you survive? How did you thrive? How are you here today?
Yes, I would say when that happened specifically in 2020 with the pandemic, what I was fortunate to be kind of ready for was being in North Jersey right here, and with the unknown of the pandemic at that point, so many people fearfully were like, well, I don't want to be in the city anymore. Yep. I want to be away from people. I got to stay 6 feet apart. So I started just by, I guess, being at the right place at the right time, getting in contact with a lot of buyers that were wanting to move out of the city and wanting to still have access because they didn't know at the time, right? It was supposed to be 2 weeks to flatten the curve. Right. And then, of course, 2 weeks turned into 4, turned into months, and then, thank God, now we're out of it. But at that point, I started getting all these buyers who were like, Dave, listen, I want to move to Sussex County. I want to move up to northern Passaic County. I want to move as far away from people as you can. But they're like, well, just in case though, how do I get back into the city? Or how do I get back into just say Hudson County because my job is in Jersey City or whatever. So I started then becoming very familiar with the bus routes, with the trains, with the highways, to know the access points, what towns were very conveniently located to get back in to the city in, just say an hour or less.
Gotcha. Now, there's so many realtors on social media.
Yeah.
I hate to say it that way, but there are, right? And realtors in existence, period, right?
Yes.
So people viewing this episode, people who watch that pool video, the suit video of you running, obviously those are entertaining. We love them. But if I want to sell a home, and you're not just a buyer's agent, you also take listings, right?
Yes.
So
yes.
Why would I ever consider you instead of all the other realtors in North Jersey, right? Or statewide?
Yeah.
What do you bring to this table that makes people want to say, yeah, I want to use Dave?
I would say probably the biggest thing that I've seen, especially recently with the power of video content and social media, is that if you can market a property better than anybody else, that property is going to get the most eyes. Right. And I did the pool video for that specific listing because I knew that that specific town, being how close it is in proximity to the city, has the bus, has the train, has the ability to drive in. And I knew the target buyer, or potentially the largest pool of buyers who would want that house, would be a potential commuter who wants to live in a suburb, but have the access and finally have a backyard. Okay. And that's exactly who bought it, right? So again, that unique ability of understanding who your buyers are and being able to target those buyers with, again, catchy videos, marketing, will, again, the whole idea is I want to do, for my client, sell that home for the highest price with the best possible terms. How do you do that? You have to have multiple offers. Right. So if you have a video that's going to grab all these people's attention and then translate to them coming, just say, to an open house or to a showing, now, as opposed to just having 1 or 2 offers, if we have 13, 14, or 15, that will usually drive up the price and usually get the seller the best terms.
Gotcha.
And that value is, again, for the seller, if their outcome is, hey, Dave, I want to net the most dollars for this house. That's where I feel like that's why you don't see a lot of other realtors jumping in pools or sprinting with a suit on, because that's not what they enjoy doing, or they don't see the value of doing videos or marketing content that's going to be really just more than a basic home tour.
And on a more personal level as well, we talk a lot about what you're reading. You're always motivated, trying to find out the next best thing for your clients. What are you reading currently, and what's the number one book that you would recommend?
So I just finished 10X is Easier Than 2X by Dr. Benjamin Hardy and Dan Sullivan. So that book is basically about, in whatever industry you're in, a lot of people think initially like, all right, I just say in terms of income, I made $100,000 this year. Well, next year I want to double it, right? So the thinking is 2x thinking. And that doesn't have to be just income. It could be in any part of your life that you want to improve something.
Gotcha.
But what they speak about in the book is it's actually easier to actually think bigger and to get to a higher level faster with, again, changing your thought process or your mindset on how you approach a problem. So I just read that one. That was phenomenal. And now I'm rereading The 7 Habits of Highly Successful People by Stephen Covey.
Okay. So that's your number one recommendation.
In terms of books to read?
Yeah.
Number one recommendation.
As far as, let's cut it down.
Okay.
Motivational, self-help, improving yourself.
I would say that book is a book, if you want to think about it as to stretch your mind to a new capacity that once it returns, it's never going to be the same. It changes the way you look at a problem or changes the way that you look at the world. So I'd say that was, from a business perspective, that could be applied to many different aspects of your life. It changes just how you look at things, because a lot of times we're spending our time on things that would be like 2x thinking or 2x problems, when you have the highest and greatest use of your time, and a lot of us are not spending our time in that space enough. Okay. We're giving so much of our time to things that, again, are important, but not the best way for you to grow. If that's your interest, you want to grow in every aspect of your life, or you want to grow in this specific way, that type of thinking really puts you in a different mental space. So you're not going to be the same Kafer that you were before you read the book, because now you're going to approach things differently.
Right. Okay.
Okay, so I want to flip the script on you.
Okay.
Now, can I ask you a question or two, let's just say?
All right, go ahead. I'll do the best I can.
Okay, so in speaking, right, we spoke about divorce.
Yeah.
So my question to you for 2025 in this climate, what would you say are 3 things that are, or something you would recommend for couples to stay happily married in 2025?
I'll try to be as direct as possible. Communication. One of the things I put on Instagram a while back is communication, right? If people can communicate, they avoid seeing me in my office, right? Communication as far as finances, expectations, things like that. 2.
Wait, but should that communication be over text, or like what type of?
Communication, clear communication. I want this, I want that, I expect this, I expect that. Because when people become passive aggressive, when people let things simmer, it leads to a call to our office, domestic violence, things like that. Second thing I would say, to avoid a divorce and stay happily married, I would say, talk about expectations at the beginning, right? How many children you think? Do you want children? Do you not want children? Finances. Where do you want to live? Where are you in your career, right? Mm-hmm. Those are big things that many people don't talk about until a year into marriage or 6 months into marriage, and you are where you are. Yeah. And then 3, you hit on it. Take time for the couple. If the couple's healthy, the children will be healthy, the household will be healthy, and it's a ripple effect. The nucleus has to be intact, and it can't be the children take over, the in-laws take over, work takes over. Mm-hmm. You have to have a common goal. One of the things that we're introducing this year is, for my business, we planned for 2025. Mm-hmm. A couple should plan. A couple should take time, put a whiteboard up and say, my personal goals, her personal goals. What are our goals together? Mm-hmm. What are our goals for this household? What are we going to work on? Where are our vacations? If a business can thrive by planning, why wouldn't a couple plan? Because it's their lives, right? Yeah. And you sent me something recently which was powerful at a divorce attorney. I forget his name. There's you, there's me, and we existed beforehand. But now we are going to exist together. But you have to allow me and you to also exist, right? You have to take care of both of you before you can take care of the children and everybody else. So those are the top 3 things I would recommend.
Powerful.
So Dave, we could talk for hours. We definitely can. I'm definitely gonna have you back.
And a couple more cups of coffee.
Coffee was amazing.
Coffee was great.
First of all, thank you for coming, for joining us tonight.
Thank you, appreciate
Thank you to Sierra Coffee, amazing host, beautiful shop.
Beautiful shop.
Amazing coffee. Please visit them, because we definitely will be coming back for more.
Right in Lyndhurst.
Yeah, right in Lyndhurst on Ridge Road. But no, thank you really for taking the time to share your insights, your information, and I'll see you in the next real estate transaction.
Sweet, thank you for having me.